What's up everyone, my name is Trevor and I am the Gaming Goomba. Yeah, that felt a little weird, almost like it's been almost 4 years since I last said it. You know, as I was writing the introduction for this video, I was actually having a really hard time deciding if I was actually going to address the fact that I haven't uploaded a video on this channel in nearly 4 years, or if it would be more funny if I just acted like everything was completely normal and I just uploaded last week and this is just another video. But I ultimately decided that I do want to fill you guys in. Not gonna bore you for too long, so here's a condensed version of my last 4 years. Let's see, I got married, bought a house, went back to school, became a dad ×2, finished my bachelor's degree, started my career, and now I'm here. Caught up? Great. Now let's talk about the Nintendo Switch 2. On January 16th, 2025, to the surprise of absolutely no one, Nintendo unveiled the Nintendo Switch 2 to the world. I have heard some say that they were underwhelmed by the announcement, partially because the console was pretty much leaked in its entirety beforehand, but also because for the first time since the GameCube, Nintendo actually played it safe. No major gimmick, nothing that changes the way you play your games, and nothing really all that different than what we already have. Outside of the increase in power, a couple of new features, and an overall bigger console, it truly was simply a bigger and better Switch. For me, this was exactly what I was hoping for. The Nintendo Switch is Nintendo's highest selling console of all time, surpassing the Wii, which no one thought would ever happen, let alone this soon after it. A hybrid console is not a one and done gimmick. It is the way of the future. Everyone attempting to copy the Switch makes that evident to me, which it would have been very Nintendo of them had they abandoned the hybrid concept altogether. I am glad they didn't. There is so much more that can be done with the Switch concept, and I am so excited to see where this generation goes. With that said, let's move on to the main topic of today's video, that being my Nintendo Switch 2 wishlist. The items on this wishlist are in no particular order and can range anywhere from the hardware itself, the interface, or just games I hope to see on the console at some point in its life. First up, I would like to see a more interesting user interface. The Nintendo Switch to me always felt like Nintendo was terrified of continuing to be labeled the kiddie console, and that they had to make the console, and specifically the user interface, as bland and boring as possible. The Switch is coming up on 8 years, and the only themes offered are still the same two that were offered at launch. Basic white and basic black. That almost sounds like a joke when saying it out loud. We did eventually get folders, but that's it. No colors, no photos, no customization, no fun. This time around, I would like to see Nintendo actually embrace who they are. At this point in time, no one cares if Nintendo appeals to the hardcore gamers. We just want to see Nintendo be Nintendo, so let's just get back to having fun again. Next up is an obvious one, but I will try to give a slightly different take along with it. Everyone, including myself, obviously wants Virtual Console back. If it were to happen, we wouldn't want a slow drip beat of games we already had on the previous console, like what they did on the Wii U. I would pretty much want to see a copy and paste of the Wii Virtual Console library at the end of its life, and then continuing to add on from there. But we have to be honest with ourselves. That is never going to happen. My assumption is we will get another version of the NSO apps that we had on the Switch. If that is the case, I would at least like to see all of the games we already have available on NSO carried over, along with a decent amount of new titles at launch, with new titles continually being added on a monthly basis, not a bi-yearly basis like they were on NSO. Next up is the hardware. I feel like the hardware itself is perfectly serviceable. I like the redesign with the magnets on the Joy-Cons, the larger size is great, and the mouse being added to the Joy-Cons is also an exciting addition. I've got my fingers crossed for a new Mario Maker or Mario Paint that utilizes that. But for this wish, I want to discuss the potential of a mid-generation update for the Switch 2. It felt like there was rumors of a Switch Pro for the entirety of the Switch's generation. What we ended up getting was the OLED model, and don't get me wrong, I like the OLED model a lot, but at the end of the day, it was just a slightly better screen. Although the screen does look great, I think the reason people were clamoring for a Switch Pro so much at that time was because the Switch was halfway through its life and showing its age. Most current generation games were only available through streaming, which could be done on an iPhone 5. There was nothing impressive about that. Nintendo themselves, and a few third parties like Bethesda, were really good at pushing the Switch to its limits, but other developers couldn't be bothered, and their games showed it. Giving the OLED model a little bit more juice would have made it significantly more desirable to me, and in my opinion, was much needed. So this time around, I hope there is a true Nintendo Switch 2 Pro to keep the console competitive through the latter half of its life. Now, we've talked about the interface, we've talked about the console itself, let's talk about what we all really care the most about, and that's the games themselves. Before I get to specific games I hope to see, I will say, as a general software-related wish, I just hope Nintendo takes a lot more risks this time around. The majority of the Switch 2 games, while great, were pretty much either a predictable sequel or a Wii U port, with a few exceptions here and there. With the Switch 2 being backwards compatible, I hope it pushes Nintendo to get a little bit more creative in general in the software department. Now, as for specific games, we already know about Metroid Prime 4 and the new Mario Kart, but what else? Some of the obvious ones are Zelda and 3D Mario. For Zelda, I honestly wouldn't mind a return to form like Ocarina or Twilight. Nothing too quirky. I would just love to see a traditional 3D Zelda fully realized with modern technology. For 3D Mario, I want the opposite. I definitely wanted a sequel to Odyssey around 2020 to 2022. But at this point, I would be pretty disappointed with an Odyssey follow-up this far removed from the first. I would not want to get away from the open world concept. I do not want to go back to the 3D world style either, but let's move on from Cappy and find a new gimmick in a new kingdom somewhere. Now that we've got the obvious ones out of the way, these are going to be true wishes. These are games that if they happened, I would be in complete and utter shock. These are the games I will put on a wish list every single year until the end of time or until they get released. The first game is none other than Punch-Out! I thought for sure we would see Punch-Out! Make its grand return on the Switch because it just made too much sense with the Joy-Cons, but alas, it never happened. I love all of the Punch-Out! Games, but the last one on the Wii was so good and well refined. I just want to see what they can do with it today. Come on, Nintendo, give Little Mac his shot. The next game I hope we get at some point in the Nintendo Switch 2's lifespan has gotta be F-Zero. Now, I know we got F-Zero 99 on the Switch, and while it was a lot of fun, it was just a retold version of the Super Nintendo game. One of my favorite games growing up on the Nintendo 64 was F-Zero X. Now, I don't need to see the game change all that much. Hell, I would even be happy with an HD remake of F-Zero X or F-Zero GX. I just want to see what F-Zero would look like in the modern day. I got a little taste of what it might look like with Fast RMX at the beginning of the Switch's generation, but I am not satisfied. Please, Nintendo, just give it one more shot. To close things out, this is a franchise that did get a new release within the last 10 years, but I am deathly afraid that Nintendo was scarred from ever doing another one. I, of course, am talking about Star Fox. Growing up, Star Fox 64 was another one of my favorite N64 games, and when Star Fox Zero came out in 2015, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than the critics and most of the general audience did. Now, the controls were a little wonky, and you could argue that it was also just kind of a remake of Star Fox 64 again, but other than that, it was great. However, I feel like that's a part of the problem. Every time Nintendo does return to Star Fox, they just end up retreading Star Fox 64. If I were to get a new Star Fox game, I would want them to try something extremely different. Just not Star Fox Adventures different. Please, dear God, Nintendo. And that is going to wrap up my Nintendo Switch 2 wishlist. Please let me know in the comment section below what you guys are hoping to see on the Nintendo Switch 2 at some point during its life. I would love to read all of your answers. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.